I'm in Union Station in DC, circa 1988, working at some jewelry store that's in between fake and precious gems when this woman's presence graces the room, outfit first. She's about 6 feet tall, a white sweater with serious shoulder pads accentuated by raccoon tails. Her face is impeccable. I see the album I brought in high school. Somewhere in my lifetime, soul jazz music. You look just like Phyllis Hyman, I say. She looks at me in silence for effect and then announces, I am Phyllis Hyman. Even at 28, I want to learn how to announce myself into a room just like her. To me, she seems to be the epitome of strength and style in a Black woman. Years later, I will learn that we have more in common than I could have imagined. We were fighting the same demons, mental health challenges, and the shame of its social stigma that kept us hiding for dear life. My most guarded secret is that I'm diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which for me is like schizophrenia with mood swings. I begin hearing voices when I'm 20. Some are voices of the ancestors. They feed me firsthand experiences, even as I am catatonic. That's when I start writing poetry. They speak through me, they shine through me, they bleed and breathe through me, they grow like vines through me. Slavery and insanity share a parallel. Do you know what it's like to be a fugitive in your own mind, having only certain safety zones? That's why I liken myself to a fugitive slave. I won't surrender to slavery of any kind, even if it's housed in my own mind. The voices of the ancestors guide my way. I'm the fruit of some very strong roots, some emanating from my mother's mother. In Jim Crow, Alabama, people existed on non existent wages. Daily denigration of character by whites was a learned experience. It was like personality, the way you choose to deal with the world. You had to figure out for yourself how you were going to deal with Jim Crow. My grandparents chose the church as their guiding institution. For them, it was far more than religion. The participants made it that way because it had to be. Beginning at age 3 in my Ohio neighborhood, I'm bullied and shamed for talking proper and not being allowed to play in the street. At my private school, I am a Black child in a sea of white faces. Even though I grew up in Ohio and West Virginia, I spent Christmases and summers in Alabama with my grandparents and those older souls at the First Baptist Church of Eufaula who guide my way socially. There's continuity here. Every Sunday, Miss Edna Watson presses a piece of peppermint in my little hand before church. She sits in the pew in front of us every Sunday morning with a knowing look that says, you know not supposed to have it in church. My mother tells me later in life she did the same for her. I see Miss Daisy, cane in hand, walking to church some steps from her home, complaining to God about the weather. I love this lady, not only because of her daily God, it sure is hot out here, but because she gave me vintage jewelry. After church, I swing on Mama Lillian's white front porch swing, and she brings me sweet tea. I'm not a bother to her, and I play with my same playmates every summer when I return, never once being bullied or chided. In Eufaula, I am Colonel and Lena's grandchild, Alfred Lena and George's daughter. There is a pride that goes with that, and it sustains me. These folks who belonged to First Baptist Church through Jim Crow, Depression, and wars were all called gal and boy regardless of age. But at First Baptist, they created a space of respect for one another, where they were always Mr. or Mrs. So and so. Everyone had affiliation, whether blood or not. It was a community of Blackness, nothing I experienced in my neighborhood in Ohio as a child. I'm 29 years old now, working a job in a small town in West Virginia. All my colleagues are white. All my neighbors are white. I haven't been going to church, so The only Black person I see most days is in the mirror. I look at her and ask why. What's wrong with your hair? Why is your natural hair not considered stylish, professional, feminine? Why do men prefer the straight, slick looks? The answer comes in a moment. I don't care anymore. I'm going to be me. I have been reading an article that tells how one of the first things that the slavers did to the ancestors was to cut off all their hair. They knew that the hair, especially for a female, was a central core of identity. They placed natty scarves on our heads as it grew back because the missus couldn't tolerate the aesthetics of our crinkling hair. We grew to be ashamed. Blue night dog howls when ancestors meet my depressed state. Cry blood tears with me. We understand the feeling. We touch hands through centuries. They clustered at my bedside when I lay unable to speak in catatonic blue. And for that, I cannot forsake what they endured. Set them free in my verse. Accentuate their wails from ship to shore. They are my own. That Saturday at 29, better late than never, I embrace the wholeness of myself and of my ancestors. I drive an hour to sit in the barber's chair and take the reins on my life. When I ask the barber to only leave the new growth, he looks at me as if I've lost my mind in Charleston, West Virginia in 1989. But he acquiesces. I cut my hair with the intention of it being natural for the rest of my life. I knew I had answered my question. What's wrong with my hair? Nothing. I spit in the face of the guy in junior high that made me feel ugly because he said my nose looked like bubblegum with two holes in it. I spit in the face of all the subliminal and maybe not so subliminal images that say the word beauty held no space for me. It upset me that the outward beauty was presented so one sided, always the European aesthetic. On this day, I ceremoniously ended that, carving my own space as I finally embrace my brand of beauty. There are more sentinels with the passage of time. Ancestors rocked me in their laps when the lights went out. They cried blood tears with me, stitched me together piece by piece like a quilt, made me sturdy, pliable like matured wood. So I tell their stories as they relate to now because my continued strength and resilience I would not have without them. They taught me survival, but each left me with a truth that still jumps to the djembe across my pages. When I heard on the news in 1995 that Phyllis has taken her life, probably because she grew tired of living with her challenges, I cried. I see us as warriors chasing and fighting the same demons. I cry because about 5 years earlier, I tried to do the same thing, only God saw fit to let me stay. I cry because if we had known, we could have honored and held each other's raw spaces and spoken of working strategies instead of embracing death as a contingency plan. Ancestral voices stay with me until I'm 44 when finally there's a medication that puts an end to all the voices. But ancestral voices still dominate my verse, always seeking freedom, seeking justice. They convince me there is a parallel to my illness. They convince me I have twofold work to do. This is when I garner enough courage to let go of my most guarded secret and begin speaking about my mental health challenges. Now, I am an advocate. I speak and write to educate, inspire, and help eradicate the stigma that keeps us from reaching out to each other or getting the help that we need. Letting all know that recovery is possible and accessible in many forms. Letting all know you don't have to rely, as I once did, on death as a contingency plan.